This is Old Line Farmer Radio, a Maryland Farm Bureau production, helping you achieve your best farm future.
Happy Thursday and welcome to Old Line Farmer Radio. My name is Parker Welch, Executive Director of Maryland Farm Bureau, and I'm your host this week. It's currently March 5th, and the estimated average price of corn in Maryland is $4.66 per bushel, and soybeans is at $9.42 per bushel. Both commodities receiving around a 50-cent drop since last week. Let's jump into some headlines and ag news from this week. The USDA announced an investment of up to $1 billion to combat avian flu and reduce egg prices. Their strategy includes millions in funding for biosecurity measures, financial relief, and vaccine research, as well as action to reduce regulatory burdens and exploring temporary import options. Maryland Farm Bureau is thrilled to announce 5 $10,000 scholarships to support educational pursuits of Maryland students interested in agriculture. To be eligible for consideration, applicants or their parents must be members of the Maryland Farm Bureau. The deadline to apply is Friday, March 21st. The Maryland Department of Agriculture is reminding rural Marylanders that you may expect temporary smells as farmers apply nutrient sources to their fields in preparation for spring planting. It's important to remember that farmers are required to follow nutrient management plans when applying these nutrients to crop fields. The Maryland legislature is discussing a number of budget cuts to state programs, and this could have consequential impacts to state-funded agricultural programs. Jeb Burchick speaks with a handful of ag stakeholders about the importance of these programs.
The state of Maryland is facing a $3 billion deficit, and understandably, difficult decisions regarding the budget have to be made. However, the Department of Legislative Services has suggested a number of cuts to programs that keep agriculture viable in Maryland, like the Maryland Ag Land Preservation Program.
I'm Cricket Goodall, and I am the acting chair of the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program. What the MALP program does is offer easements to property owners who are interested in preserving their property and maintaining it in an agricultural production. To Maryland being a small state and having that kind of vibrant, strong ag community, you don't want to injure it in any way. We're living near a lot of urban development with Washington, D.C. and some of the Maryland counties, but Maryland, with MALF and other programs, has been very cognizant for a long time about keeping at least swaths of green space in all the counties.
While this program has widespread praise, supporters were shocked to find out that the state has proposed completely defunding it for 4 years.
The budget as proposed did not anticipate these cuts. We at MALF were actually we understood it was going to be tight and thinking that the budget would not increase, but we would not be affected. And then Tuesday, we found out that that was not the case, that DLS had come back and made some pretty dramatic cuts.
Many other ag programs designed to help farmers are also receiving cuts. The Maryland Ag Cost Share Program is funded through the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund. The program helps farmers to defray the cost of conservation projects, to promote sustainability and bay cleanup efforts. And yet, it's on the chopping block too. We spoke with Talbot County farmer Travis Hutchison, who has successfully used these programs in the past.
We've been in the cover crop program since the inception. We used cover crops before it started cost share, so we were a believer in them. But when they started cost sharing, we increased how many acres we did and made it more of a priority. Especially right now when grain prices are down and everything, you have extra expenses that you hadn't had in the past. It's going to put even a more financial burden on the farmers. All these cuts are going to hurt the bay and the environment in Maryland.
Even programs that were seemingly insulated from cuts are under scrutiny. The Southern Maryland Agriculture Development Commission was designed to help farmers in Southern Maryland move away from tobacco crops and assist them in diversifying and marketing their operations. It is funded through a special fund and not taxpayer dollars, and yet they are expected to be fully defunded within 3 years. Their executive director, Shelby Watson-Hampton, explains.
So when we talk about SMATIC's funding, it's really important to note that the SMATIC funds are not taxpayer dollars. They are not the state general fund. They come from a special fund called the Cigarette Restitution Fund. The CRF comes into the state of Maryland every year. When the money comes into the state of Maryland, it can only go two places: to the Maryland Department of Health, which gets the bulk of it, and then a tiny, tiny portion can come to SMATIC for the farmers who are looking to replace the tobacco fund. Because just last year, with our $900,000 budget, we leveraged it to bring in an additional $2 million into the state from outside grants and funding. State gave us 900,000. We turned around and made an additional 2 million that came into the farmers. Knowing that this is super important to the farmers in the region and knowing that we still have work to do. Last year, we actually set out to get a permanent bill passed for legislation to fund SMATIC, and the bill was actually passed with strong bipartisan support. But now the governor's proposed budget has come out, and it makes basically that null and void. And they're asking to continue to decrease SMATIC until we are gone and completely defund it in 3 years. No longer provide funding for the CRF.
When asked how folks can oppose these dramatic cuts, the answer was clear. You have to make your voice heard and speak directly to lawmakers.
We in the ag community have to advocate for our own future. You have to show why ag is important. You have to show what the value is to those counties and the state. And more than just beautiful rural land, that's important, but it has to be an economic driver that the state recognizes so that it understands why it's investing in that land.
Listeners can make their voices heard and write their legislators in opposition to these dramatic cuts by visiting mdfarmbureau.com/action-center. Jeb Burchick, reporting for Old Line Farmer Radio.
Through all of these actions, the Maryland Farm Bureau is working to ensure agriculture has a future in our state. Support us in our mission by becoming a member at members.mdfarmbureau.com. As of midnight on Tuesday, tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico have gone into effect. American Farm Bureau's Chad Smith explores what this could mean for American agriculture.
At 12:01 a.m. on Tuesday, March 4th, tariffs on Mexican and Canadian imports went into effect. At the same time, the tariff on Chinese imports doubled. Dave Salmonson, Senior Director of Government Affairs with the American Farm Bureau Federation, says these tariffs now cover a significant portion of American agricultural exports.
Mexico's $30 billion a year in our ag exports. Canada's 29. China's been about 24. Add them up. Those three countries are half of all U.S. agricultural exports. The U.S. said they were going to put 25% tariffs on good imports from Mexico, 25% on most things from Canada, 10% on energy products, and with China, we added 10%.
He says tariff retaliation includes a large list of U.S. agricultural products.
From Canada, starting off with a 25% import tariffs on U.S. products going in. We got poultry and dairy, wheat, barley, rye, a lot of grains. China also has a retaliation list. This will go into effect on March 10th for chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton, 15%, and then 10% tariffs on soybeans and sorghum and pork and beef and fruit and veggies, dairy products.
Salmonson says there are still some possibilities of negotiations on exclusions for agricultural products.
Now, these tariffs so far, other than a lower tariff on Canadian energy products, but there really haven't been exclusions. Over 85% of our potash comes from Canada. We don't want that subjected to a 25% tariff that the U.S. put on it. Why don't you exclude that? If this lasts any length of time, the pressure on doing exclusions will certainly rise.
For more information on the tariffs, go to fb.org/trade. Chad Smith, Washington.
With that, please give us a rating and review. And if you learned something today, please share this podcast with your friends. Old Line Farmer Radio is a production of Maryland Farm Bureau. Produced by Jeb Burchick, and contributions this week from Parker Welch, Kendall Aberzizi, and Chad Smith, and introduction by Hollis Zimmerman. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time on Old Line Farmer Radio.